This isn't a fairy tale. This was the real life of Isabella of Valois. The year is 1396. England and France have been locked in the brutal Hundred Years' War for decades. Both kingdoms are exhausted, their resources drained, their people weary of conflict. A fragile truce is on the table, but to seal it, something more is needed, a bond of blood. And so, a marriage is arranged. The groom is King Richard II of England, a man of 29. The bride? 6-year-old French princess, Isabella of Valois. Think about that for a moment. A 6-year-old child, taken from her home, her family, her world. She's dressed in the finest silks and velvets, adorned with jewels she can't even appreciate, and handed over to a foreign king in a foreign land. She can barely speak his language. She doesn't understand the documents being signed, the treaties being forged in her name. All she knows is that everything familiar is gone. The wedding itself was a spectacle of medieval grandeur. Held in Calais, it was a magnificent affair designed to impress. Nobles from both England and France feasted for days. Wine flowed freely. Tournaments were held in celebration of this new alliance. Peace, at last, seemed possible. But amidst all the pomp and ceremony, there was a tiny, bewildered girl at the center of it all, Isabella, the child queen. Upon arriving in England, she was given a grand household at Windsor Castle. She wasn't leading armies or making laws. She was a queen in name only. Her days were filled with lessons from tutors, learning English, Latin, and courtly etiquette. She was surrounded by ladies-in-waiting servants and guards, but she was profoundly alone. She was a living symbol, a political pawn in a game far too complex for a child to grasp. To his credit, King Richard II seems to have treated her with kindness and respect. Contemporary accounts describe him visiting her often, speaking to her gently, and treating her more like a cherished daughter than a wife. He understood she was just a child. He was patient, waiting for her to grow up. But the marriage was never meant to be a normal one. It was a political statement. And Isabella's very presence in England was a constant reminder of the fragile peace with France. She was paraded at court functions, a beautiful, silent doll meant to signify unity. But outside the palace walls, the kingdom was simmering with discontent. Richard's reign was becoming increasingly unpopular. He was seen as extravagant, tyrannical, and too reliant on a small circle of favorites. His nobles, powerful and ambitious men, watched his every move with suspicion. The peace with France, sealed by his marriage to a French child, was particularly unpopular with those who had profited from the long war. They saw it as a weakness, a betrayal of English interests. The storm finally broke in 1399, while Richard was away on a campaign in Ireland. His cousin, Henry Bolingbroke, whom Richard had previously exiled, returned to England. Bolingbroke was a charismatic and popular figure, and he quickly gathered support from the disgruntled nobility. By the time Richard returned, it was too late. His support had crumbled. He was captured, forced to abdicate, and imprisoned in Pontefract Castle. Henry Bolingbroke was crowned King Henry IV. Suddenly, Isabella's world was shattered once again. She was now just 10 years old, and she was a widow. Her husband, the king who had treated her with a strange paternal kindness, was gone. Rumors swirled about his death. Did he starve to death in his cell? Was he murdered on Henry IV's orders? We'll likely never know for certain, but Richard II was dead, and his child queen was left at the mercy of his usurper. The new king, Henry IV, had a problem. What was he to do with the young, widowed French queen? She was a direct link to the deposed regime and a powerful symbol. His solution was practical. If ruthless, she should marry his own son and heir, the future King Henry V, who was then a young teenager himself. This would secure her loyalty, legitimize the new dynasty, and maintain the connection to France. But Henry IV underestimated the will of this 10-year-old girl. When the proposal was made, Isabella, who had been a quiet and obedient child her whole life, refused, point blank. She declared her unwavering loyalty to her late husband, Richard. She would not betray his memory by marrying the son of the man who had overthrown him. It was an astonishing act of defiance from a child who had every reason to be terrified. Her defiance came at a great cost. Enraged, Henry IV effectively placed her under house arrest. He stripped her of her royal household, confiscated her lavish wardrobe and priceless jewels, cut her off from her French family. The child queen of England became a prisoner, moved from castle to castle, her freedom completely gone. For over 2 years, she lived in this limbo, a political hostage, while negotiations between England and France for her return dragged on. The English wanted to keep her dowry. The French wanted their princess back, but without having to pay for her release. Finally, in 1401, a deal was struck. Isabella was allowed to return to France, but without her dowry and without the jewels she had been given as Queen of England. She was still only 12 years old when she set foot back on French soil, her brief, traumatic reign over. Her life had been a whirlwind of crowns, castles, and political intrigue. But now, she was simply a girl again, albeit one who had seen and endured far too much. For a few years it seemed she might find a measure of peace. Back in the French court, she was reunited with her family, but her status as the former Queen of England made her a valuable bride once more. In 1406, at the age of 16, she married again. This time it seemed to be a match of affection. Her new husband was her cousin Charles, Duke of Orleans, a renowned poet and a powerful noble. For a brief period, Isabella experienced a happiness that had been denied to her throughout her childhood. She and Charles had a daughter together, but fate, it seems, was never on her side. Just a year after giving birth in 1409, Isabella died from complications following the childbirth. She was only 19 years old. Her life was a brief, tragic footnote in the grand, violent saga of the 100 Years' War. At 6, she was a queen. At 10, a widow. At 19, she was gone. The peace she was sacrificed for didn't last. The war between England and France would rage on for another 4 decades. Her name, Isabella of Valois, is rarely mentioned in the lists of English queens. She is the forgotten queen, the child bride whose life was dictated by politics and power. Her story is a heartbreaking reminder of the human cost behind the grand tapestries of history, a story of a little girl who lost her childhood, her freedom, and ultimately her life, for a crown she never asked for. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as moving as I did, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more forgotten stories from history. We'll see you in the next one.